So then we could go through here again. You know, a vignette in itself mightn't work so well here because you're going to see it at the corner of the frames as the camera pans or moves across. So this is where we might actually, we'll start with a similar shape, but we'll stretch it right out so that we don't have any edge issues. Again, I'll just convert it, do some softness in here, darken it down, flip it so that's the outside. And so now through the shot, I'm not worrying about edges, but because it's kind of a horizontal move, our shape can sit there without me really having to animate it. But we've now kind of pushed into the center of the frame, so it's more mysterious. It looks a little bit more dangerous. Finally, what we can do is just for something fun to tie into that last shot is we could maybe do a nice little light beam coming through this window. So draw a shape here, extend it out a little bit on the outside softness. So again, just looking at the mat, this is the shape that I'm doing. I want to soften off these edges so I don't get any starring or linear fall off. So this looks good, but I might actually want to make it brighter in that light beam. So let's just, you know, brighten it up like that. But it's affecting the shadows. I don't really like that. I kind of more want to enhance just what's happening in the highlights. So what I can do is I can mix this with a luminance key. So let's go through in here. Let's look at the mat. So you can see I'm just going to affect the highlights in this area. So we can, I'm going to affect the softness here of how much is being picked up. Say I like that. Do a little softness. So now if I turn it off, you know, I'm enhancing the light that's already there. And in this regard, it's quite subtle, but maybe I want to flare it out. I'll turn off this key completely so you can see what I'm doing. So this is where I want it. I'll turn this key back on, but I will affect how much is being impacted. And then I could go through and I could track that shape in, again, like using the shape tracker. And in this regard, let's see, I always like to just shuttle over the area and see what it's doing. So we could say we could probably just deal with an XY, so a pan and tilt here. So let's just track it back for a little bit. So you can see the characters are affecting the shot a little bit here in terms of the track. So again, we can use certain tools within the package to say, let's ignore these values. So now it's like kind of tracking into the window and the frames. And there still might be some things like you can see it's being dragged away, but I don't need the light beam there. So what I can do is, where does it start going wonky? I'll put in a keyframe there, maybe remove the automatic tracking, and then just throw a little bit of keyframe animation on here as we go across. And I'm also going to zero out the opacity. So that means that color correction is not going to have any influence. So as we go through, it will flare out. So if I again go to this view, so you can see and hit play, as the shot pans around, we're saying that that light is going to flare through. So it turns on. So this is keyframing's dynamics. It's a way of affecting the color over time, because what we could also do is we could do, so this flare, see, will come in as the window reveals itself. Again, this is subtle stuff, but it's building a lot of these subtle things layering up on top of each other. And before you know it, you have quite a different image resulting at the end. Sometimes you might need to affect what the beginning of a shot looks like to the end of it or a part of it. So in this regard, it's quite dark here in the hallway, and then it gets a bit brighter over here. So let's say we like the darkness because we're supposed to be spooky, but we want this side to be a bit darker. So this is where I can do a dynamic. So a dynamic is an animated color correction. So I can just very quickly go in there and set keyframes, move it to where my destination is, let's say here. So now I'll turn that off, and if we play this shot, as the shot moves across, when my keyframes kick in, so say around now through to here, I'm dynamically affecting the exposure of the shot to make that a lot more consistent across the shot and to keep the mood at the beginning of the shot to the end of the shot as it goes through. Also, because I made it moodier and darker, it helps with the shadow of the guy in the background, you know, but you can still read the key light on him, very nice, and we go through. So now we're looking here and we go, whoa, that's way too bright coming through the top of that window. The blinds are working very nice in the background, but this window is quite bright. So maybe we just want to throw another topper up there, which we could either just do as an entire frame, or we could, you know, we could isolate the area in question. So again, I try to keep things, the shapes that I do, organic. I try not to have like hard geometries that you could recognize. And then the way that I blend those with the softness in the edges helps to hide what we're trying to do here, which in this case is kind of darken down this area here. So I'm winding the gains down and I'm lifting the gammas up because I don't really want to make it darker in the shadow area. It's more about the highlights that I'm worried about. We are getting into a clipping issue, so there's only so much you can do because there's no detail up there. But you can you can see how like we're making it less distracting at the top because the shot is obviously not about that window. The shot is about her and the guy coming up behind her. And then we can just, you know, we could throw a track in there to try to just track that window through. Okay, and so we finished tracking this, and now we have a nice window up there, so it helps direct the eye down to look at her, because that's what's important, is there's a guy in the background, but it's all about her, it's not about the window. So let's move on to, say, the final shot. What could we do here? We already, you know, did our general balance on here, but let's just do a little bit more shaping. So just like what we did before with the window, let's do a little bit of a shape here so that we can really isolate and make this shot all about what's going to happen here. Let's do that. And then let's see if the shot doesn't really move that much. So even if the shot doesn't move that much, if I end up doing a pretty strong color correction between the inside and outside, I'll still track it. So before I showed you the shape tracker, there's also just a point tracker in here. So we can add a point and let's just track. We'll grab the point, I have to zoom in. Grab this point and we'll just track this point here. So it doesn't look at like an arbitrary number of points. It just looks at a specific region and it tracked it in. So we get that little bit of movement in there. I'll just make sure my shape is aligned up there, get the flare in there because it's quite nice. And so now we have that. And because it moves with the camera, it feels a little bit more realistic. Last thing, just for something fun to do, we could do a super quick light sash over here. Again, I'm going to pull things down, but wind them up at the same time. So I'm not crushing, I'm just reducing the contrast on the outside here. Again, to direct the eye. It's all about to direct the eye and what's in there. Again, let's see, I want to track, let's just use the shape tracker here. So we're on the cloud tracker. I moved my shape up into the top corner. Sometimes the tracker works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on what it hooks into. But we let it do its thing. And then we'll see if this is good. It's probably not so great. Let's try it again over here. because there might be some more things that it can hook into. So this is feeling like it's probably going to be a little bit better. So how specific a track is kind of depends on how much of a change you're doing in the color correction. So the more difference for the inside and outside, the more accurate it has to be. Similarly, with if you drew a shape around a face, the more accurate it has to be if you push things in a stronger way. So the general rule is the bigger the difference that you're making, the better the quality of what you're doing has to be. It can't be just hidden through softness. So one last thing, just a quick technique, because I'm just going to throw it in there just for fun. We could go in there, we could do a little highlight key on her face. Let's just do this. Let's do a rough holdout, so it's just in this area. We'll go back into our keyer. I will grow the key, so that means the points you can see are getting bigger. So there's more adjustment here. We'll go back and we'll soften that out. Get out of this mode. And now I can affect the contrast in here, give her a little bit of a glow, and that's our little pro mist effect through that shot. So I'm going to turn around here. So again, just a nice little bloom because she's in the light of the window. So all of these things tied together, I'll play this in super fast. It's all about getting the initial balance to get the general feel of the scene right, and then augmenting that with the finesse tools to do it, to really create the mood and the vibe that you want. You know, if you only have a limited amount of time, experience, your computer maybe isn't fast enough to do things, the most important thing when you're doing color correction is to get that balance right. So that base level color correction is the most important thing. That's the foundation of which everything is built upon. Everything else basically is gravy. So all of the shapes and windows and removing C-stands, like if that can't be done, like the C-stand, it can be done in visual effects if it's needed to. But what's most important is getting a really solid continuity base pass and getting the mood right. Then you do your next layers, maybe vignettes or a topper or a bottom, and it's, you know, simple kind of shapes. Just got to make sure you smooth them out enough so that it's not obvious and it feels like it's either a photograph shadow or a grad or something the audience won't, like, you know, grab hold of and say, hey, that looks like that's been done after the fact. If you ever do that, then that's a problem. It always has to feel photographic. Then you move into specific isolations if you need to change the color of an eye or a face or whatever. But you basically want to build a pyramid of finessing. But it's always important to have that solid core, color balance foundation. And then as your skill improves over the years, you can gradually add more and more things. And what will also happen is you learn to see images differently. You don't see images how they necessarily come in. You see in your mind's eye where they will end up. And that's super important and key to being a good colorist. But you won't know that until you get experience. So all I can say is look at many, many, many images, hours of footage, and just learn to look at everything in the frame. It might take your enjoyment out of a movie or something for a while you're actually learning these techniques to see everything, but it will really help hone your craft as you get into it, because you get to, as soon as you look at a shot, you instantly know where you should be looking without having to ask the question of the director, DP, or editor saying, what's important about the shot? Ultimately, you should never really have to ask that question, because your eyes should automatically go to the section that's most important to the shot, why that shot was chosen, and then you shape around that. So you are then guiding the audience to look where they should be looking. And then the rest of your image just happens to be beautiful.